My name is Dwayne Crawford. I made the documentary you're about to watch to make sure the truth is heard and never forgotten. Our storyline unfolds within the context of a speech Mrs. Patty Stokes made before the Summerfield Town Council on March 13, 2007. In this speech, Mrs. Stokes, as representative of the Northwest Observer publication, accuses me, then a seated council member, of illegally violating the Northwest Observer's Forum online database. Mrs. Stokes made a huge mistake that day. Not only was her online database never violated, I've always been able to prove it. March 13th, 2007.
Okay, my name is Patty Stokes. I live at 6911 Summerfield Road. I'm here speaking to you tonight as both a Summerfield citizen as well as a majority owner of the Northwest Observer. I've heard and have often read over recent years a lot of these phrases about code of ethics, high ethical standards, open and honest government. I challenge you to tell me what is open and honest about the following scenario. I leave my door open. Someone comes in. They walk through my house. They look through my things. They take some of my things. They share those. They boast about walking through my house and taking through my things. I make this analogy. It's not unlike what has happened on the Northwest Online Forum.
Hey, hold on just a minute. This thing's been one-sided for way too long now. What say you and I step back in time for just a minute? Everybody needs to have a little look-see at this thing Miss Patty's been talking about. The date is August 23rd, 2007. Having received a heads up from a friend that the Northwest Observer Forum was going down, I figured I'd better capture a record of the database glitch home invasion thing I'd been accused of. We begin with a rather grainy shot of the August 17th edition of the Northwest Observer. Zooming in on the upper right corner, we can just make out the publication date of August 17th through 23rd, 2007. To save time, I've already loaded up a sample forum page. Let's pan over to the monitor and zoom in. Here, you can clearly see the forum topic is "Much Ado About Nothing," end quotes. Not so clear is the forum web address. It's found here and reads nwobserver.mywowbb.com. Moving right along, we zoom out and page down until we hit the end of the page. Zooming back in at the bottom of the page, let me draw your attention to the version of WowBB software being used to host the forum. Here we find the forum was running WowBB version 1.7. On March 13th, 2007, Patty Stokes posted to her forum, "On the subject of forum hacking, forum software has been upgraded to ensure our forum is more secure. I cannot, however, guarantee it is hacker-free." It was the previous version of WowBB 1.6 that I was accused of hacking. The significance of running the non-hackable version of 1.7 will soon be very apparent. Pan right and then up a little bit. Now watch what happens when I use my mouse to click on the link to Much Ado About Nothing's page number 12.
In the upper left-hand corner of our web browser, we see we have experienced an error. This error is a result of the Northwest Observer's forum software generating HTML content that cannot be parsed and properly displayed by a common web browser like Firefox. This is, of course, a problem with the Northwest Observer's software and not a result of any hacking attempt. We do not have to look too far before we find the IP address of some person that posted to page 12 on Much Ado About Nothing. Here we see a forum post associated with internet address 71.76.133.182. If one takes the time to look at enough forum pages over a long enough period of time, one would find this particular internet address was heavily used by the same Northwest Observer employee using their real name and 2 pseudonyms. The occasion of a Northwest Observer employee leveraging the forum to present their opinions under alternative anonymous identities is not unique. Before delving into that issue, let's further examine our forum error page and compare it to what a properly formatted page 12 on Much Ado About Nothing should look like. On this line below the one containing the IP address, we see a value 4722 associated with some parameter we've already scrolled past. We'll just hold this value in our head for now and see where it appears on a normal forum page. Rolling our video forward, we see a parameter named user_joined associated with a value of October 23rd, 2005. Let's now peek at a normal forum page and see how this data is presented. Here is how page 12 on Much Ado About Nothing looks when the Northwest Observer Forum delivers properly formatted HTML content. We can see right away this page looks nothing like the page on which we experienced the error. Zooming in on this post by Crackerjacks, we can see that she joined the forum on October 23rd, 2005, and that she has made a total of 4,722 posts under this identity. Zooming in on the post immediately before Crackerjacks, we see it was made by the Northwest Observer employee using the pseudonym Maka.
I can tell by your glazed expression that I'm starting to lose you. What's the point you've got to be asking yourself? Please bear with me. I'm going to tie all this together real soon. At this point, I want you to understand just two things. Number one, web servers can deliver valid and invalid HTML content, and then when presented invalid HTML content, that your web browser will experience an error and show you the invalid content. And number two, erroneous content generated by the Northwest Observer's forum software contained information indicative of those who posted anonymously on their forum. A question one should ask is, why are you the only one who experienced this error? The answer to that question is, I'm not, and moreover, I have always been able to prove it. We're going to hear from Patty again here in just a minute. She's going to give me a segue into that discussion point, and we will discuss it then. On this issue of figuring out which anonymous forum member is who, sometimes the participants that would otherwise want to remain anonymous just can't help themselves. They run their mouth way too much. Case in point, Miss Cracker Jacks. Now here's a person that's just craving attention. Among the things that she told us on the forum about herself, back on November 3rd, 2005, Councilman Bob Williams' daughter, Lori White, turned her on to the history of door hinges. I guess this is a book. On December 26, 2005, she talked about her 20 years of marriage. On December 29, 2005, she's got 3 kids. Number 3 is down with a bug. January 10, 2006, gotta go to Girl Scouts. January 22nd, 2006, doing a little birthday celebration myself this weekend, she tells us. January 31st, 2006, I grew up in Summerfield. February 28th, 2006, my spouse has an old Mazda pickup truck. It just goes on and on. With all this information in hand, it was not too hard to figure out Cracker Jacks is none other than our very own executive director of the Summerfield Youth Council, and Councilman Bob Williams' other daughter, Kim Jackson. It was back in September 2006 when I paid a visit to Sandra Smith's office at the Northwest Observer to discuss a post by Cracker Jacks. Reporting on a council meeting she'd attended, Ms. Jackson had anonymously leveled the charge that Councilwoman Becky Strickland was abusing her office. Becky's offense was asking for special parking at the park grand opening due to her back condition. What Ms. Jackson failed to mention in her anonymous attack was that her father, Councilman Williams, had asked for exactly the same privilege. I also pointed out to Sandra Smith that someone on the council had leaked closed session information to anonymous forum contributor Fat Pappy for the clear purpose of attacking Becky Strickland. This is not right, I told Sandra, especially when you consider Kim Jackson sits as executive director of the Summerfield Youth Council. As I was leaving, Miss Smith assured me she would take up the issue of forum anonymity abuse with Patty Stokes. Little did I know at the time that Sandra was carrying out her own covert anonymous forum operations. Post-IP data gathered from forum error pages leaves us with no doubt that Northwest Observer's managing editor Sandra Smith started using pseudonym Zippity Doodah on or before October 19, 2005. This was at least 1 month before ever submitting a post under her real identity. What kind of activity did Sandra engage in using her Zippity Doodah persona? At the very least, I think she engaged in an ill-conceived deception. At worst, I think Sandra exploited the anonymity of her own forum to manipulate the way people think, to express contempt of neighbors she disagrees with, and to self-righteously plug for and drive attention to the Northwest Observer publication. Most heinous of all, I think Sandra seditiously postured herself as a Summerfield resident for the purpose of fomenting discontent, inciting an uprising, with full intent of supporting and profiting from that uprising via the Northwest Observer publication. I want to emphasize that these are my thoughts, and you may draw a completely different conclusion based on the information you're about to see. Let's first review Zippity Doodah's frequent plugs for Smith's Northwest Observer publication. November 16th, 2005. Zippity says, I read in the Northwest Observer they're doing surveys in Oak Ridge and Summerfield. Are they doing that here in Stokesdale? January 1st, 2006. Zippity says, I've been reading in the Northwest Observer about that ugly house in Oak Ridge. January 7th, 2007. I don't think I care for the look of the building. It was recently printed in the Northwest Observer, says Zippity. Next page. January 15th, 2006. There's another picture of it in this week's Northwest Observer, says Zippity. January 15th, 2006. Zippity tells us there's that piece of property in Oak Ridge across from the eyesore people keep talking about in the Northwest Observer. Next page, January 15th, 2006. Nobody said anything here lately, says Zippity, but the Northwest Observer said they would soon start taking bids. If anybody's got a comment, now's the time to get it out there. January 22nd, 2006. Has anybody sent in their comments to the Northwest Observer yet? Asked Zippity. February 18th, 2006. Sounds like the lady who wrote the letter to the Northwest Observer isn't very happy, Zippity tells us. February 21st, 2006. Zippity says, good idea. Maybe someone at the Northwest Observer will let us know when the next meeting is. It just seems like somebody doesn't want to let us know what's going on. Next page. June 27, 2006. For the love of Pete. Zippity says she agrees with Sandra's editorial. July 23, 2006. Speaking of her own turkey shoot article, Zippity says, that Northwest Observer article explained a lot, but I'm not sure how I feel. What do y'all think? July 23rd, 2006. Zippity says, I hope the Northwest Observer will report on it. Next page, August 8th, 2006. Zippity says, in fact, there is one advertised on the front of the Northwest Observer this week. September 1st, 2006. There was an interesting letter on page 31 in this week's Northwest Observer on the same subject, says Zippity. Next page, November 11th, 2006. From that article in the Northwest Observer, it sounds like those people don't know what they want, Zippity says. Here we have a Zippity post where she, Sandra, is responding to a previous post by Sandra. I kid you not. I'll spare you the gory details, but if interested, you can pause this movie and review this post for yourself. Sandra goes into great detail about Summerfield Recreation Association expenses and how much money they don't have and how they don't have the means to raise the money it takes to run a first-rate program. And here we have another instance where she, Sandra, uses the form to communicate with Sandra. Sandra, not Zippity, talks about a pending turkey shoot decision to be made. Sandra closes with the question, what do you guys think? About 45 minutes later, she, Zippity, also known as Sandra, comes in and gives a truly wacky response to her own question. This needs no further comment. The next 6 Zippity posts we're about to review provide examples of Sandra leveraging the anonymity of her own forum to posture herself as a Summerfield resident. From these posts, one should note Sandra's obsession with how much money the town of Summerfield has built up in reserves. Also apparent is Sandra's obsession over one particular project she thinks the town of Summerfield should be spending money on. In this sarcastic post, Zippity suggests revenue realized from the sale of scrap metal salvaged from park cleanup activities to not be used to finance Summerfield Recreation Association interests, so that we, meaning we, the residents of Summerfield, would have ever greater excess reserves, at least excess in Sandra's mind. Here we see Sandra responding as Zippity to a distressing statement observed by former council member Jane Doggett. The statement in question was made by yours truly. What I said was that I think we, as a community, should make sure our children are aware of and encouraged to take advantage of their God-given opportunity to satisfy their own wants, and that they should not be encouraged to seek gratification from their neighbor's wallet via the government. Sandra sarcastically jokes about not getting beat up by Jane and therefore not being able to help raise money for the SRA. This Zippity post is related to the one we just passed. Former council member Jane Doggett, still very much distressed over comments I'd made regarding the SRA, continues her rant. Sandra segues into her own rant about how I, then a seated council member,
didn't really care about kids. Miss Smith, an Oak Ridge resident, but speaking from the position of a Summerfield citizen, closes her post with the snide comment, "Wonder what the next target will be in the name of saving our money," meaning our Summerfield citizen money. "It seems to me you have to be careful what you wish for. You might get it," says Sandra to the Summerfield citizens in this zippity post. She continues, "For lots of people, the bottom line is, what is it going to cost me? If there are SRA members out there who voted for some council members, meaning Crawford and or Strickland, just because they wanted low no taxes, it might be coming back to bite them." Speaking again from the position of a Summerfield resident, Sandra closes, "But what are we saving those millions of dollars for anyway?" And here we have yet another post by Zippity, hammering her position on town spending as it relates to the SRA. Sandra says she would be personally insulted, again speaking from the position of a Summerfield resident, if my proposal for implementing ball fields were okayed by the rest of the council. What was my proposal? Just that the town sell a certain type of bond to build ball fields that would be paid off through usage fees. We've arrived at a very important post in this series by Zippity Doo Dah, where she calls for an uprising in Summerfield against town residents she disagrees with. Sandra, again an Oak Ridge resident, specifically calls for the Summerfield uprising to occur not just on her forum, meaning the Northwest Observer's forum, but a real uprising. The date of this post, November 11th, 2006, is extremely significant in that it immediately precedes the formation of the organization called Friends for Summerfield. Some 9 days later, after calling for the Summerfield uprising as Zippity Doo Dah, Sandra again challenges forum members to stand up against council members she has a problem with. Northwest Observer Forum supermoderator Steve Adkins answers Sandra's challenge to start an uprising and states that he's ready to let some people know he doesn't like certain council members' tactics.
Now, presumably, there's a glitch in the database software.
Yep, Patty, there is. The Northwest Observer Forums is not the only site suffering from the same undocumented problem with WowBB software. 3 other completely unrelated sites running WowBB 1.7 have been identified where members have posted seeing strange behavior and or content being served up by WowBB forum software. In all 3 cases, forum members have posted examples of the erroneous HTML content their forums are respectively serving up. And in all 3 cases, the content is identical in nature to the malformed HTML content the Northwest Observer Forum was serving up. Moreover, before the Northwest Observer Forum was shut down, the issue that the Northwest Observer has raised so much cane about was demonstrated to a large number of professionals as well as those who are nearly computer illiterate. Not one single individual who witnessed the forum dealio, as Sandra would put it, had any doubt hacking had not occurred.
Therefore, my analogy of leaving my door open. We were not aware of it. But just as that does not give anyone the right to come into my house, it also doesn't give anyone the right to go in to our forum, access confidential information, share that with others, email it to others, post it on their website.
The Northwest Observer may not have kept their access logs, but I've kept all mine. Patty, you should know that I can show you on what day a particular anonymous forum member figured out how to gain access to my personal collection of information on my website. I could show you where he relayed that knowledge to another anonymous poster using the email address of a recently formed grassroots organization in the town of Summerfield. I can also show you where Sandra Smith accessed one of my confidential files, the existence of which she would not have known about unless made aware of it by an earlier trespasser.
And of all people to do this, an elected official who is basically telling citizens, I don't like what you're saying, and I don't think that you should be able to say it anymore. And if you want to say it, I'm going to make a big scene about it. And I'm going to keep doing it, and I'm going to keep doing it.
Patty, I want you to explain something to me, please. I'd spoke with Sandra off and on over the course of many months on the issue of form identities. On at least 2 occasions, once in September 2006, Sandra told me she thought I had the identity of one specific form member incorrect. What I want to know is, was it or was it not very hypocritical of Sandra to only lodge a complaint with the ACLU once her own alternate form of identity had become uncovered?
Now, Councilman Crawford has been goading me for the last several months. He's been wanting to know what action I'm going to take.
Now, Patty, that's flat out not true, and you know it. I asked you and Sandra before the 2005 election if you thought Zippity-Doo-Dah, Salty Dog, and a handful of others might be open for a face-to-face dialogue. We only spoke twice between that time and the time I pointed out 4 Northwest Observer employees and or affiliates were inflating form membership by holding multiple identities each. The first time was on November 14, 2005, when you and Bill Peterson and I met in Oak Ridge. The other time was when you thanked me for bringing in the cantaloupe to your office in September 2006. There was no goading, Patty. You should tell people the truth.
I want to go on record as saying I'm taking no action. I'm neither confirming or denying the identity of any of our former forum participants. So in that sense, I'm taking no action. However, Councilman Crawford, I challenge you that what you did was not ethical. It was despicable. You have stepped on the rights of local citizens. You have infringed upon their freedom of speech, and I will take action. I am taking action. I will be pursuing all the avenues as to not only what is ethical, but what is legal.
Mrs. Stokes, your days of honoring yourself and your kind will someday reach an end. Until that time, let's provide your neighbors with a relevant and very important fact that you and your paper have heretofore failed to disclose to law enforcement and your neighbors. Patty Stokes and the Northwest Observer publicly accuse yours truly, Dwayne Crawford, of unethically hacking the Northwest Observer's online database on March 13, 2007. At no time has Mrs. Stokes ever put forth any effort to disclose that her very own forum supermoderator, Steve Adkins, freely offered to give away backup copies of the Northwest Observer's forum database, passwords, email addresses, IP addresses, and the whole works back on November 2, 2006. Metaphorically speaking, Mr. Adkins had already given away Patty Stokes' precious house, with its open door and all things contained therein, a full 4 months before Mrs. Stokes targeted a seated council member for public humiliation and ridicule. Adding insult to injury, the Northwest Observer's forum supermoderator documents in his post on November 2, 2006, complete ignorance of what he had accomplished in the creation of a forum database backup, much less any awareness of what he was giving away.
I find it's a sad day here in Summerfield when a council member can handle some criticism. And when they think that people do not have the right to say what they want to say without you disclosing their identity, then they have asked that that not be disclosed. And I would furthermore say that a glitch in software does not give you the right to barge into our online forum database. And I have others who agree with me as well. I have no things to say on such a thing.
Thank you, Ms. Stokes.
Ah, yes, here we go again. What we're hearing is classic Northwest Observer tactics. Anyone who doesn't ascribe to the Northwest Observer dogma is subject to public ridicule and humiliation. Heaven forbid you might voice an opposing opinion, or worse, attempt to expose hypocrisy and or hidden agendas of those deemed fit for unconditional protection as measured by the Northwest Observer. Whereas if you lie or tell a half-truth or deceive, the Northwest Observer gives you a free pass as long as the lie, the half-truth, or the deception is in furtherance of the Northwest Observer's agenda. If the Northwest Observer had the guts to say in plain English what their real beef has been with yours truly, I submit the record will show it might be summarized as follows. Number 1. I believe a person must be held accountable for their words and actions, and I act accordingly. Number 2. I am willing to openly speak my mind about what I think is right and what I think is wrong. And number 3. I believe deception should not be tolerated when found, and I act accordingly. I think the record will also show that the Northwest Observer very effectively acted to constrain my ability to act according to my nature, starting with Ms. Stokes' speech on March 13, 2007. Once Ms. Stokes stated she would be seeking a criminal investigation, the best legal advisors available to me told me to remain silent on the whole affair. Complicating matters was that the person investigating and advising the Northwest Observer on database hacking happened to be Mayor Mark Brown's cousin, Scott Redmond. Not only is Scott the Northwest Observer's webmaster, but Scott is also webmaster for Guilford County, including the Sheriff's Department. Scott also created and was webmaster for Sheriff B.J. Barnes' 2006 election campaign. For those not informed, yours truly has had an adversarial relationship with Sheriff Barnes, his wife, Summerfield Councilwoman Barnes, and Mayor Mark Brown over the course of several years. Further complicating matters for me is that information technology is my chosen profession and the means by which I pay for my bills and fund my retirement, a fact that has been exploited time and time again, rhetorically and otherwise, by the Northwest Observer. My attorney once asked, "Does the situation put you in fear of losing your job?" "Absolutely," was my reply. For these reasons and many others that I will reveal over time, I regretfully resigned from the Summerfield Council. I had to distance myself from the council darlings that receive a free pass from the Northwest Observer on anything they say. I had to distance myself from a situation where I could not speak freely on a non-issue given life and sustained by the Northwest Observer for the sole purpose of keeping me silent. And in that sense, Sandra Smith, Patty Stokes, and the Northwest Observer got exactly what they wanted for nearly a year now: my unconditional silence. Ironic, is it not, that this is exactly what they accuse me of trying to achieve. If you are a Summerfield resident, I beg your indulgence, your consideration, and ideally your participation in Summerfield politics over the coming years. Much has transpired in the last 12 months that should have been challenged and or better explained to the citizens. Thank you for listening.